Okay, so let's bring in Republican strategist Adam Goodman. Look, I led off last week's show by asking you what you thought of the Trump communications operation. How about now?
Wow. I mean, we just saw a 30-minute or so press conference that is unlike anything we've ever seen in our lifetime. It was a communication on three different levels. One, to the people in the room. Two, to the others in Washington who were looking on in shock. And three was to the American public. And the amazing thing is you'll get three different report cards. To those in the room, the media, they couldn't believe the president was going after not just them, but at some of the questions that had been lobbed at the White House recently the way he did. Two is the rest of the Washington establishment. I heard you could hear a pin drop in the corridors of the Capitol as they were watching this press conference. It's like the world stood still. And then the third part is the American people. And I think there's going to be a different read from them. Like it or not, this is a guy that's going to bring it directly to them. With everyone else kind of listening in and looking in, we are not used to this kind of presidential style. And if you try to use conventional measures to assess it, I think you do that with some risk because we don't know how this is going to turn out other than at the end of the day, if the Trump administration is half successful in doing what they promised to do to for the American people, everything's going to be fine. This will just be an interesting sideshow to all that. If not, this will be something looked at as maybe the beginning of a definer of his presidency.
Oh, since the beginning, he's been a man who has wanted to speak directly to the American people. But when you have the press, who is essentially the voice of the American people, and he's either deflecting the question or avoiding it altogether, I mean, how can people, I mean, what is that? He isn't answering questions that people are going to want the answers to. So how can this really continue on?
Well, let's put it this way, Marissa. We now have four parties in America. We have the Republicans, the Democrats, the party of one, which is the party of Trump, and the media. There are four different political parties, in my opinion. And what you're asking is addressing the one party, the party of the media. The media has had, I think, a bad role in the last year in terms of their ability to be the decipherer of information and truth. And as the Edward R. Murrow, if you don't mind me plugging, as Edward R. Murrow scholar at Tufts, Edward R. Murrow taught us, in terms of the media, be straight. Give the information and news to the American public. Let them decipher that for as they may, as opposed to always interpreting. We are now into a period of great interpretation and opinion, and I think that's what you're now seeing. How that plays, Marissa, in terms of the American public and his presidency, in this case, Donald Trump, I think the jury's out on that. But we have never seen anything like this, and I'm not so sure that Donald Trump and his instincts aren't right here.
What about his instincts saying that he would have directed Michael Flynn to discuss sanctions with Russian officials before the inauguration, knowing that there is a law dating back to the 1700s saying that you cannot discuss and conduct foreign policy as a private individual?
This is the easy question, right, Craig? No, that was a mistake. I think that was a mistake, and I think there's also another mistake that this president has made so far, and I hope he corrects it. He is very bold and straight out. He also has to be honest enough to admit when things aren't going completely according to plan. He said in this press conference that so far the administration has had a seamless start. I don't think anyone on any of the three publics I mentioned before would give him a seamless start as a report card grade on the first four weeks, and that's okay. It's a transition. A transition is to get used to something different. There are going to be things that are done or not done that you look back and say I should have done that differently. I think he should be more direct and straight with the American public. When things aren't working out according to plan, they will love him even more. Imperfection in politics, which is something that politicians tend to worry about, is actually a blessing. It shows you're a human being willing to admit when things aren't going right. And I think Donald Trump would score big if he were to do that at some point.
Do you think he's capable of doing that at some point?
Hopefully, because he really won by strength of personality as much as anything else. And I think he's going to have to rule and govern that way if he wants to do that successfully.
What's your take on Trump getting called out on the facts in real time in that Thursday press conference in which he misstates information about the Electoral College repeatedly. Then he says, oh, well, I was just speaking about the information that was given to him.
It was just given to me. Well, we talked about this last week, that there's a difference between campaigning and governing. And I think when you campaign, you have a little bit more license to be maybe not as completely tight and together on the facts as you are when you govern, because when you govern, as a campaign professional, I hate to say that, but it's true. But when you govern, I mean, everyone's looking in, and they're looking in on everything, and they're parsing everything, and they're interested in everything, and they're double checking and Wikipediaing everything, and you got to be a little bit tighter. And I think that's not just a fault right now of the president, but also I think of the team. The team's got to simply get their act together stronger. Now, the team around him that you've not heard from yet, because you've heard about the Flynns, and I think that the dismissal of Flynn was the absolute right move. You haven't heard from the Tillersons and the Kellys and the Mattises. When those start to weigh in, those kinds of leaders around this president, I think we're going to have a different read on his presidency and on the way this country will fare.
If you were President Trump's strategist, what is the one thing you would tell him after that press conference that needs to be fixed, needs to be changed?
Hire Adam Goodman. I mean, I think he needs to have talent around him that gives him feedback on press conferences like that. I think, by the way, there were some really good, powerful things about what that press conference represented, particularly the fact he stood on his own 2 feet and he went at it. And he didn't just take a question or two, he took probably about 20 different questions. He did it with humor, he did it with some aplomb, and of course, some of the things he said or didn't say, he knew would generate a lot of fur flying. But I think it's all intended to show that he is a person that is not going to hide behind anyone else and bringing his message, for better and worse.
Adam Goodman, thank you for your time.
Thank you.